India's foreign policy. Introduction. From the last chapter, we understood the world in the Cold War period, the arms race, and the efforts at disarmament. We also learned about the global developments from 1945 onwards and the meaning of globalization. In this chapter, we shall study about the meaning of foreign policy, factors that make an impact on it, and the nature of India's foreign policy. Foreign policy. Meaning and importance. Every nation has policies about its internal dealings, as also about its relations with other nations. Such a policy is called foreign policy. All countries are members of the international system. We have already studied that none of these countries is completely self-reliant, and hence there is mutual interdependence in the international system. Only this interdependence should not be of benefit to a few countries. Efforts need to be made to ensure that it benefits every nation. Each country has to decide the nations with which it should be friendly, in which bloc it should participate, or what position it should take in international relations. Such decisions should be made thoughtfully. Every sovereign and independent country decides its own foreign policy. Hence, in the discipline of international politics, which studies the international relations between nations, foreign policy has an important place. National interest. National interest and foreign policy are closely connected to each other. National interest is fostered through foreign policy. National interest implies the means through which the independence and sovereignty of our country can be safeguarded. National interest also includes efforts to achieve our economic development and to take steps towards increasing our national power. The following factors are included in the national interest of any country. Defense, the protection of our country's independence, sovereignty, and integrity is the highest national interest. Economic development. An economically weak nation will not be able to maintain its independence. Hence, economic development is understood to be an important national interest, next only to defense. National interest and foreign policy. Foreign policy is drawn up to foster national interest of defense and economic development. National interest is considered to be the goal and foreign policy is considered to be the means to achieve it. Goals of nations change with changes in conditions and time. Accordingly, national interest also changes. These changes are reflected in the foreign policy. Therefore, foreign policy is always dynamic. Do you know? When we have to study a country, it is necessary to understand its constitution and its foreign policy. Factors influencing foreign policy. Foreign policy decides what kind of relations to have with which country in the international system. But several factors affect foreign policy while it is being decided. Come, let us learn those factors one by one. 1. Geographical location. You must have seen the globe or map of the world. You can see the geographical location of any nation from that. Some countries are far away from other countries, while there are several neighboring countries around some countries. Some nations have a long coastline, while some have plenty of mineral wealth. In some, the size, population, topography, coastline, availability of natural resources, all these factors need to be considered while deciding the foreign policy of any country. 2. Political system. In a democratic political system, the nation's parliament plays a major role in evolving foreign policy. When different aspects come up for discussion in parliament, the opposition parties try to regulate the foreign policy by raising questions about the same. Federal political systems have to take into account the inclinations of the constituent states while shaping foreign policy, because the affairs in neighboring nations affect constituent states. For example, events in Sri Lanka may affect Tamil Nadu, and those in Bangladesh may affect West Bengal and the Northeast Indian states. 3. Economy. In modern times, the economic condition of any country has acquired great importance in deciding foreign policy. As a result, the economy impacts foreign policy in two ways. Let us see those two ways. 1. Foreign policy is shaped by the need to establish economic relations with other countries, import-export, participation in world trade, all aimed at strengthening the economy of the country. 2. In today's world, the issues of economic securities are as important as national security. A country is recognized to be powerful in proportion to the economic security it enjoys. Countries having a strong economy are less dependent on others, and they can have an independent foreign policy as well. 4. National leadership. The President, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Defense Minister, the Finance Minister and the Home Minister have a role in deciding foreign policy. The persons holding these positions try to maintain the continuity in foreign policy and to improve upon it. For example, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru contributed the policy of non-alignment to India's foreign policy. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee contributed a great deal to improving Sino-Indian relations. 5. Administrative factors. Ministry of External Affairs, Foreign Secretary, embassies in different countries, diplomatic officers, etc. are the administrative factors involved in creating foreign policy. Even though the final decisions about foreign policy are taken by the Prime Minister and the Minister for External Affairs, the administrative machinery helps to arrive at that decision. The administrative officers collect information needed to shape the foreign policy, analyze it, and give appropriate advice based on it. The National Security Advisor also completes this task. Why should this be done? The peace and stability in the neighboring countries is as important as that within our own country. Hence, India has to take efforts to create democracy in neighboring countries. What will you do? You're working as Foreign Secretary. The Prime Minister is going on a visit to China. As Foreign Secretary from the Ministry of External Affairs, what topics will you suggest the Prime Minister for discussion? Answer. As a Foreign Secretary from the Ministry of External Affairs, I will suggest the Prime Minister to discuss about the importance of India's role in BRICS and also about the Partnership for Progress and Peace. India's foreign policy. India got independence in 1947, and from then onwards we started shaping our foreign policy independently. The directive principles of state policy have laid down guidelines about how to shape foreign policy. Article 51 among the directive principles of state policy lay down the broad framework for foreign policy. According to it, India should give priority to safeguard international peace and security and resolve our international problems and disputes by peaceful means. The objectives of our foreign policy should be to maintain friendly relations with other nations and respect international law. Other objectives of India's foreign policy. Let us learn the other objectives of India's foreign policy. While maintaining friendly relations with neighboring countries, ensure that the defense and security of India is not affected. Not to compromise about the geographical boundaries of the nation. Protect the unity and integrity of the country. Protect the interests of India's citizens living in other countries. This responsibility is fulfilled by the Indian embassies there. To establish economic and commercial relations with other countries for achieving economic development of India. A review of India's foreign policy. We shall take a review of India's foreign policy in two stages. The period from independence to 1990 can be considered as the first stage. Second stage would be from 1990 till date. India's foreign policy, early phase. Prime Minister Pandit Nehru shaped India's foreign policy in the early period. He opposed colonialism through India's foreign policy. He took an internationalist position and gave priority to global peace and security. Three things influenced India's foreign policy in this period. They are: 1. We made an effort to understand all international events and developments independently, without any pressure from any power. Peace has always been a central feature of India's foreign policy. 2. The threats from China and Pakistan was also taken into account. 3. One more feature of India's foreign policy at this time was the insistence on self-reliance. In the beginning, India decided to improve relations with countries in Asia. Efforts were taken to cooperate with Asian countries in order to achieve development and to keep our independence intact. This concept of regional development later expanded to include Africa as well. But some Asian African countries participated in the military pacts led either by America or the Soviet Union. This stopped the process of regional development. After this, countries of Asia and Africa which did not participate in these military pacts supported the concept of non-alignment. Peace and freedom became the fundamental principles of non-aligned policy. In this period, India had to face conflict with neighboring countries. Wars happened between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir question in 1947 to 48 and 1965. In the third war that happened in 1971, Pakistan broke apart and independent Bangladesh was created. In the decade of the 1970s, there came about some stability in India's foreign policy. India had risen as a powerful regional power in South Asia. By conducting nuclear tests in 1974, India had also proved her nuclear capability. From 1980, however, some changes began to take place. In order to increase cooperation among South Asian countries, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, was established. India initiated a dialogue to improve relations with China. India also started interaction with America for cooperation in the field of security. First stage, 1947 to 1990. India adopted the policy of non-alignment in the context of the Cold War. As a result, priority was given to maintaining friendly relations with all nations and to taking the help required for development from different countries. Due to the policy of non-alignment, India could get aid from both the superpowers. There was a lot of stress on improving and strengthening India's defense. The technology required for this was imported. Soviet Union, France and Germany helped India in this matter. In this period, India had to face some challenges. These included the conflict with Pakistan, creation of Bangladesh, and conflict with China. India proved her nuclear capability by conducting nuclear tests in 1974. Contribution of Pandit Nehru to India's foreign policy. His stand was that India should independently understand the global or international affairs. He followed up with the policy of peace. Second stage, 1991 till date. India's foreign policy became more comprehensive and dynamic in the second stage. In the post-Cold War period, the priority no longer remained to political and military relations. Several other dimensions like economy, trade, education, and technology got included in foreign policy. After 1991, India reduced the government controls over the economy and adopted the free market policy. Naturally, there was an increase in trade with neighboring countries. Our share in world trade increased. Efforts began to be made to increase the rate of economic growth. In the decade after 1990, our relations with South Asian countries like Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, etc. became stronger. Our trade exchange with Israel, Japan, China, and European Union increased. India began to participate in organizations at the international and regional levels more than before. For example, G20 and BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Our relations with America strengthened. Mutual trust grew. India's status rose in the international community. India's nuclear policy is an important part of India's foreign policy. You must have studied the meaning of nuclear energy and its uses in subjects like history, geography, or chemistry. Having understood the importance of nuclear power, India undertook the nuclear energy program immediately after independence. For this, we established the Department of Atomic Energy and the Indian Atomic Energy Commission. The first chairman of Indian Atomic Energy Commission was Dr. Homi Bhabha. Even though electricity generation was the main purpose behind the program, it also aimed at creating military capability. As a consequence of this, India conducted her first nuclear tests in 1974. India built nuclear weapons and conducted nuclear tests in 1998. We have also made missiles carrying nuclear weapons, and the Air Force and the Navy have been enabled for carrying them. Can you find out what is the meaning of economic growth rate? Answer: economic growth rate is the rate at which a nation's gross domestic product (GDP) changes or grows from one year to another, wherein GDP is the market value of all the goods and services produced in a country in a particular time period. Prepare a chart of the economic growth of India, Nepal and Bhutan. Do you know? Nuclear weapons are extremely destructive. Hence, it is necessary to make consistent efforts so that they are never used. 2 treaties have been made to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. 1. Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NNPT. 2. Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, CTBT. The conditions of both these treaties are of benefit to big nuclear powers, and they put unfair restrictions on developing countries. Hence, India has not signed either of these treaties. India is now a country which has nuclear weapons. We have accepted the role of a responsible nuclear power. India has been consistently supporting efforts for disarmament because it is India's position that there should be peace and security in the world. Having taken a survey of foreign policy in this way, we are going to study India's defense system.